In today's session, what I want to talk about is some of the trends and predictions we see in the DevOps space. And these are some trends and predictions from some of the thought leaders, some industry analysts, some research reports that have been done, and also from the Electric Cloud team based on some of our engagements with customers, prospects, and other folks. So before I jump into that, first of all, I do want to introduce who Electric Cloud is if you're not familiar with us. We are actually the co-founder of the conference. We co-founded this with IT Revolution and Gene Kim about 3 years ago, so it's great to see what this has grown to. And in terms of who we are, our mission is to help the world deliver better software faster. We believe that in today's age, every company is a software business, and you live and die based on your ability to deliver software innovation. What we offer is we offer a DevOps release automation solution. It's been cited by some of the leading industry analysts as one of the top solutions out there. If you are interested in learning more about our product, more about our company, I encourage you to go to the booth and visit us there. So to kick this off, one overarching trend that we see is just the growing adoption and the growing importance of DevOps. What started as some ideas and discussions at Agile 2008 and sort of the first DevOps days in 2009 has really mushroomed, and it has really become pretty big, and we're starting to see adoption by large enterprises. But one question is, why are we seeing a lot of this adoption? So, we live in this very highly dynamic, highly competitive world, and as I mentioned before, software innovation becomes very important. And what you see is new business models that are being enabled by technology, being enabled by software systems, and that's leading to a lot of disruption. And so software innovation, people creating new models powered by software, has the ability to create billion-dollar companies, and it has the ability to destroy billion-dollar companies. And just some examples that a number of us are probably aware of. I mean, if you look at Amazon, it radically transformed the retail sector. So with technology and software, it really sort of led to this e-commerce revolution, and now every retailer effectively has to respond and become effective at online retailing. If you look at Apple upending the music industry with sort of iTunes and 99-cent songs, Uber, of course, the whole taxi industry with a mobile app where you can request and pay for a car for hire, and then a back-end system for logistics of dispatching and processing payments. And the last one I show on here is GE. And GE is kind of an interesting case. So you see GE on the bottom here, you see GE on the top. And the reason that is that GE has, over the years, transformed itself. One of the things that Jeffrey Immelt said, the CEO of GE, he said, look, if we don't focus on software and software innovation, we run the risk of being disrupted by someone out of Silicon Valley. And so it really makes sense for us to pay attention and to invest in software. And they did that. They invested $1 billion in a software center in San Ramon so they could be good at this. And if you look, business disruption is rampant. This is a chart. It's an Insight survey that was done in 2012. And what it shows is the average tenure on the S&P 500 index. And if you look back here, if you go back to 1958, the average tenure was about 61 years. If you go to 1980s, 25 years, 18 years today. If you roll forward to 2030, 10 years is the expected lifespan. So between now and then, probably 75% of the S&P 500 is going to turn over. So as you can see, disruption is rampant, and it really is some of these new companies that are coming in with innovative business models that are powered by software and technology. So as Charles Darwin said here, it's not the strongest, it's not the most intelligent that survives, it's the ones that are most adaptable to change. And so we have to continuously sense what's going on in the marketplace, continuously respond. And as IT folks, we have to enable the business to kind of move ahead and compete in this world. So what is the cost of not changing? What is the cost of doing things the same? Ignoring just the disruption that might be out there as a risk. This is a report from IDC, and it was on the cost of downtime in the Fortune 1000. On average, in the Fortune 1000, it's $100,000 per hour is the cost of an infrastructure failure. If you look at a mission-critical application, on average, the cost of downtime is $500,000 to $1 million per hour. And if you look across the entire Fortune 1000, it's estimated that downtime costs about $1.25 to $2.5 billion per year. Now, you saw some of the stats that Gene shared, and I'll kind of share those again. There are benefits to transforming, and so if you have to kind of have higher uptime, if you have to deliver faster to stay competitive, there's a lot of benefits from DevOps transformation. These are some of the stats that Gene also shared this morning on the benefits of DevOps. And if you look at high performers compared to medium performers and low performers, 200 times more deployments, more frequent deployments, 24 times faster recovery from failure. So again, that kind of speaks to the downtime. 3 times lower change failure rate, 2,555 times shorter lead times. So the people that are performing like this, these are the winners in the space. And look at the cost of the total downtime. If you look at the number of deployments and the cost for downtime per deployment, for a high performer, $37,500. If you look at a medium performer, almost $5 million, almost $3 million for a low performer here. So the benefits of transforming are huge, and if you want to stay competitive in the space, DevOps is one of the great ways. So that's one of the reasons that we're seeing such DevOps adoption. So now we talked about sort of the macro trend of DevOps picking up steam and enterprises picking it up. Now I want to kind of drill down. I want to talk about 3 categories in terms of trends and predictions. The first one is the nature of DevOps adoption that we're seeing. 2 is what we're seeing in terms of trends on tools and technology. And finally on org process and culture. So let's go ahead and drill in. So first off, I talked about this a little bit before. I borrowed the slide from our friends over at Dynatrace. But by the end of 2017, this is another IDC report, 2/3 of CEOs of Global 2000 enterprises say digital transformation will be at the center of their corporate strategy. And that's the CEO. This is not the CIO. And this is saying that digital transformation is going to be at the center of the strategy. So CEOs understand how important it is. And what we're talking about is 2/3 by the end of 2017. So that's the end of next year. And as a result, to survive and to succeed in some of these digital transformation efforts, you heard some of the stories this morning, we're starting to see enterprises adopt DevOps. It's no longer just for the unicorns. You'll see here sort of the rhino running along here a little bit. And it's becoming mandatory in the Global 2000. DevOps is really becoming mandatory out there. And if you look at just this conference alone, we did the first one back in 2014, 3 years ago. And we had 600 people in the room. We hit fire code capacity. We were pretty impressed at the time. Now, as you heard this morning, we have about 1,300 people in the room, over 500, between 500 and 600 enterprises that are represented here today. We have almost 50 sponsors. So this is real. This is really picking up steam today. Now, if you look at the enterprise adopting DevOps, it is a little bit different from the unicorns. I mean, if you're a Facebook, if you're a Google, things are a little bit different. But if you're in an enterprise, you have some very unique challenges out there that you have to address. You've got legacy systems. They may be built on traditional monolithic architectures. You may have multiple business units, and you're going to have a wide set of applications. You may have thousands of applications running on hundreds of thousands of endpoints, tens of thousands of developers. You may have high regulatory demands if you're in financial services, if you're in healthcare, growing security risks at this point, so you have to address that. If you're a very large organization, you have massive scale, as I've touched on before. In many organizations, they don't want to do DevOps for each individual business or each individual group. You're seeing sort of the rise of self-service shared services where you kind of provide an enabling infrastructure. So how do you do that to support DevOps initiatives and DevOps automation across the entire organization? Lots of tools, lots of integrations out there in terms of development tools and platforms that you run on. So I think what you're going to see is a lot of the early tools that were out there was a lot of open source, but you're going to see a rise of enterprises looking for enterprise-ready tools that can solve some of these challenges and looking at vendors that can address some of these needs that you have here. Again, we work with customers where it literally is that. It's 10,000, 20,000 developers. It's over 150,000 endpoints that they're deploying to. 5,000, 6,000 applications. So kind of doing that at that scale is pretty important. So this is Enterprise DevOps Conference. So I've talked a little bit about enterprise. I want to do a little side note here and note that it's not just enterprises. It's also small and medium business out there as well. This is from a RightScale survey, the State of the Cloud 2016. 81% of enterprises are adopting, but 70% of SMBs are adopting. And there's a lot more small and medium businesses out there. So the market is about 75% of the market is in SMB. So this is something, again, every business is a software business today. Every business really has to kind of pay attention to this. Okay, so what we're seeing is broad enterprise adoption. We've seen that shift. The other next trend and prediction that I want to kind of make is that we're actually seeing that application release automation is the hottest category within DevOps. And a lot of people, when you kind of look at it, you think of some of the enabling infrastructure, you think of cloud, you think of containers, you think of configuration management. But if you look at customers who are starting to adopt, analysts that are starting to pay attention to the market, they're saying one of the areas that you can get some of the most value is from application release automation. This is from Gartner. This is a 2015 Gartner DevOps survey that they did. They surveyed 338 IT business leaders. They said, when you look at the technologies, the DevOps technologies that you are adopting, which ones have been most important to your organization's success? And if you look at the number one vote getter by far, it's application release automation. 60% say that that's the number one technology in terms of what's important to their organization. Close number two is automated testing. Automation is important. Automate everything that you can, so no surprise there. But then you see a pretty big drop-off. So, why application release automation? Again, it comes down to that deployment speed. You want to be able to deploy faster. You want to be able to deploy faster without jeopardizing downtime, without jeopardizing quality. And that's why there's so much benefit from application release automation. This is another Gartner report. This is from this year. They were sort of looking at global enterprise application release automation adoption. They predict that by 2020, 50% of global enterprises will be adopting application release automation. That's up from 10% today. So what that means is 40% of the global 2,000 is going to be adopting application release automation in the next 3 years. And that's going to continue beyond that. So, if this is not something that you're looking at, this is probably something you need to be looking at. And if you're not, it's probably something that your competition may be looking at. One slide ahead. So the other thing is, major analysts are starting to cover this space. DevOps is relatively new. There's a lot of confusion. Whenever you come into a new market, it's kind of like cloud circa 2007. Everyone jumps in and say, we have a solution. We've got a DevOps solution. It's very confusing if you're a customer out there, if you're an IT organization. What are the technologies I need? What are the various solutions out there? And this is one of the new segments that's emerged out of the DevOps space. So all of the leading analysts are covering this. I mentioned IDC before, but you've got Gartner, you've got Forrester, you've got Ovum covering it. They're doing vendor research reports. Gartner just recently published the first inaugural Magic Quadrant for application release automation. They've said this is a solution that you need. And I'll do a little bit of bragging here as the Electric Cloud CEO. Won't do too much more of this, but in all reports we were cited as a leader. In the Gartner Magic Quadrant we were cited as the number one vendor, highest on the vision and the execution axis. Okay, so that's it really about the nature of DevOps adoption. A lot of enterprise adoption. Application release automation really is one of the new hot spaces. We've also, previously we've seen a lot around configuration management of infrastructure. Now I want to drill down a little bit more into tools and technology. So on the technology side, probably the biggest trend that we see out there with our customers in the marketplace is the rise of containers and microservices. So microservices are just very suitable to DevOps. I mean, when you start architecting your solution around a smaller set of services that do one thing and do it well with very well-defined interfaces, it makes it much easier to deploy more rapidly, to be able to deploy sort of a microservice without risk of breaking something else. It really reduces a lot of the coupling that's out there. And if you look at containers, containers are the ideal deployment vehicle for microservices. Again, it's designed to run one process isolated with very little deployment and runtime overhead, so it's very well suited to this. So we're seeing, pretty much across the board, we're seeing people adopt it, but we're starting to see this being rapidly adopted in the enterprise. And so when we looked at, what do you need on this front, we went out and we talked to some of our customers who are adopting Docker and microservices. We talked to some prospects. We talked to other companies out there who are adopting it. And we wanted to understand some of the needs and challenges that are out there. But first of all, Gartner is saying that this is being adopted too. So just like DevOps, containers and microservices are on a rapid adoption rise. It's estimated by the end of 2016, 25% of enterprises will be adopting and running containers in production. We heard Target say that this morning. That's the end of this year. That's December. That's next month. 2 years from now, at the end of 2018, 50% of enterprises are expected to be running containers in production. So this is coming up. And when we talk to customers who are starting to do this, here's some of the challenges in the enterprise. It dovetails a little bit about what I talked about before, but a lot of organizations have legacy systems. They have a lot of applications that are written in monolithic architectures. You have to continue to sort of release and support those applications. A lot of new things are being developed. If you've got new projects out there, some people are developing those only in a microservices only model, deploying those with containers. But then what you also see is hybrid. Some organizations we're talking to is they've got their monolithic architecture, and over time they're refactoring those. They're actually introducing microservice and containers, and so they've got a hybrid application architecture out there. So you have to be able to support all of this. And if you kind of look at the pipeline, the software delivery pipeline, it's similar at the highest level, but when you kind of drill down, again, what you need to be able to do is model and understand sort of containers and microservices as a first-class citizen. And what you're actually moving through the pipeline, instead of doing sort of a lot of deployment commands, you start moving some of these containers through the pipeline. So similar to high level, but under the cover is a little bit different. And then finally, again, we talked about a lot of the buzz in containers. There's a number of container orchestration engines, a number of runtimes, a number of cluster management solutions. You've got Kubernetes, you've got Amazon's container service out there, you've got Docker Swarm, you've got a lot of these things. And these are all different. When you kind of go under the covers, how do you actually run and how do you manage the clusters? It's all different out there. There's a lot of concern about vendor lock-in. It's not clear who's going to kind of emerge as the winner in this. So a lot of enterprise organizations are concerned about vendor lock-in on the runtime orchestration side, okay? So this morning, Electric Cloud announced Electric Flow 7.1. This is the latest version of our DevOps release automation solution, and we have major advances in our microservices and container support. So it addresses a lot of the needs that we talked about before. In Electric Flow, we can now model traditional apps with components and tiers. We can model microservices-only apps, and we can model hybrid apps where they have a mix of a traditional architecture and microservice. We're modeling how you can kind of move these containers through the pipeline. And again, maybe one of the most interesting things is on the deployment side. So what we've done is we've created an abstraction layer. So companies don't have to understand the specifics of how do you configure Kubernetes, how do you configure Amazon container service. And you just set it up and you say, deploy to this environment. We handle everything under the covers for you. And then if you want to switch over time, if you want to switch to a new provider, you can do that, and Electric Flow will handle that for you. So again, you don't have to understand the details. You avoid some of that vendor lock-in. So if you're interested in learning more on this, our CTO, Anders Wahlgren, will be doing a session, I believe it's tomorrow, on microservice and containers, the PB&J of DevOps, something like that. And we're showing this in the exhibit hall. So if you're looking at containers, looking at microservices, and wanting to understand how you might be able to introduce that, I encourage you to go to visit our booth in the expo hall. Okay, so we talked about containers and microservices. You've heard this before. I'll kind of echo what you were hearing on stage this morning. I think the other big trend that we see is shift left, and shift left of operations and shift left of verifications. So basically what this means is moving earlier in the life cycle, activities that are traditionally done after deployment into production, or things that are done pretty late in the life cycle. And the goal here is to identify issues earlier, reducing their impact and cost. Again, the earlier you can kind of find issues, the less cost, the less impact it has. So automated testing, critically important. You saw that on the Gartner survey. Automated testing, 51% of folks are saying it's important. And now, increasingly, you want to do automated testing. You need to do automated testing, and it needs to be fast. You want to be continuously testing every change that's out there. So you're going to see more and more automated testing tools that are being optimized for DevOps and more of this continuous delivery model. Monitoring, typically that's done after production release, and you'll start using monitoring tools to identify performance degradations, to understand end user response time issues. Now you're seeing people move that earlier in the life cycle using technologies like those from Dynatrace, where you can identify these earlier in the life cycle, doing much more continuous monitoring and identifying these issues in lower environments before they impact your users downstream. The other thing that kind of aids in this in terms of shifting left is service virtualization. So with service virtualization, there might be external services that are costly or not readily accessible. It might be a mainframe service, might be a third-party service that has cost. With service virtualization, you can emulate that service. You can have a virtualized version on it. It allows you to do more comprehensive testing, more early testing, more continuous testing along the way. So across all of this, you're going to see cycle time be important. It's all about speed now in this DevOps world. One of the things that we expect to see, one of the things we're working in our labs is test acceleration. As you start getting more and more automated test suites, the time it takes to run those test suites can be a very, very long time. So we're looking at implementing some test acceleration capabilities that can radically reduce the amount of time for some of those tests. I could have put this on the prior slide, but the other thing that we're seeing is secure DevOps. And a lot of people think that DevOps and security might be at odds with one another, but that's not genuinely the case. Again, one of the overarching philosophies with DevOps is to break down the silos, to collaborate, and so forth. But this is another shift-left activity, and with DevOps, you're going to see more security verification happening earlier, more built-in compliance validation checks happening earlier in the life cycle and fully integrated with the development process. So there's a number of vendors out there that focus on security testing, automated testing, service virtualization. A number of them are here in the exhibit booth, and you're going to see more of this in the future. Okay, the other thing with enterprises, you know, they've got a number of tools that we've talked about. A number of enterprises want to choose best-of-breed tools. And over time, as organizations have begun to adopt technology, some of those best-of-breed solutions are starting to emerge and become a little bit more evident here. And enterprises would like to see these integrated out of the box by vendors. And in this matrix, it's a very high-level matrix here, but I've got dev on the left, I've got ops on the right, and I kind of break it down with infrastructure on the bottom. That's your cloud, that's your Docker, that's configuration management, and more application-oriented technologies on top. And this is some of the tools that we regularly see out there, regularly see a lot of enterprises working with. You know, we have a solution that can orchestrate the whole end-to-end delivery pipeline. We've got a plug-in model. We have integrations with a lot of these solutions, but this is something that you should look for is integrations with some of the tools that you have out there today. The next trend that we see is what I would say is the next prediction is big data meets DevOps predictive analytics. So in this case, if you look at what DevOps tools have done to date, it's really been about automation. It's been about automating the process, automating the configuration. But if you look at these pipelines, you're collecting quite a bit of data from all these tools. You're collecting a lot of metrics on the overall end-to-end release pipeline. And so if you can start applying machine learning to this, you can start getting some very interesting data out of this. You can start getting some trends of what's happening over time. You can start to predict failures, and you can start to identify areas for optimization within your pipelines. And you know, as this thing kind of emerges a little bit further, the ability to set up policies as well, to say if something is going to deviate from this policy, you can reject a pipeline run automatically. So this is something that we expect to see as DevOps vendors kind of move from just automation to analytics, to metrics, to predictive machine-based learning. Okay, oops, went too fast there. The last thing I'd like to talk about here is organization and process. So we've talked about adoption trends, we've talked about tools and technology trend, but want to talk about organization, process, and culture. And the first thing I think that we're going to see, the first prediction, is that culture is going to truly be recognized as a DevOps differentiator. You hear it over and over again how important culture is here. But I think in a lot of organizations, that's not entirely internalized. I think, you know, there are some technologies where you can simply buy a solution. You can go out to a vendor and buy a solution, you'll get a lot of the benefits. That is not the case here. And we work with a number of customers out there, and they'll be using very similar tool sets. They'll be using the same orchestration platform. They'll be using a lot of the same tools, but the outcomes are radically different. It's radically different, and the differentiator usually comes down to culture. So it's the people that espouse some of these cultural tenets, the shared responsibility, the truly empowered autonomous teams, the can-do attitude, continuous learning, that are going to get the best benefits. And so going and buying the tool alone is not going to accomplish it. And I think over time, when you start seeing the different outcomes of people buying the same tools, I think enterprises will come to realize how important this is. Hopefully, those enterprises realize it soon enough to make a difference. Okay. ITIL adapted for DevOps. So, you know, one of the big discussions out there has been is ITIL counter to DevOps, or they sort of again in conflict, not really compatible. That's not really the case, and there's going to be some sessions here. You know, Axilos is here as well. There's been some articles, and what we foresee here is that ITIL is going to have to become more agile. We're going to see it be accelerated. We're going to see it be automated. And what we expect to see is that instead of a change advisory board, it's going to move much more to an auditing model, where you're kind of checking, did all the automated tests go through, instead of sort of injecting a person in the middle of that. And if you have all your automated tests passed, have that thing be pre-approved, and it can automatically be deployed into production. And on the configuration management side, you know, we do expect to see more discovery there to kind of populate the configuration items, and also having the pipelines themselves actually generate the CIs as part of that delivery process. So these are some of the things that we expect to see on this front. Okay, this movement, again, as I mentioned, it started in 2008, 2009. And the goal was really overcoming some of the conflict between dev and ops. Patrick Dubois was very frustrated with the conflict that he was seeing when he was a systems admin with the dev groups. There was talk of agile infrastructure. But the fundamental philosophy is broader than this. The fundamental philosophy is about breaking down silos. It is about shared goals beyond that, and it's about collaboration. And so what we expect to see is even more of a breaking down of the barriers with the business team and also with the InfoSec team. We talked about secured DevOps before. There's other functional areas as well, so I expect over time there could be a diagram here that's much more of a flowering. But again, the fundamental philosophies are there. So we expect to see this evolve from DevOps to something that's really more biz, dev, ops, sec as we move in the future. So collaborating with the business team, collaborating with the security team is going to be very important. Let's see, I went the wrong way. Okay, so there are some other talks, there's some other resources that I would point you to. There's 15 Electric Cloud sessions, about half of those are from some of our customers, half of those are from Electric Cloud. A couple that I'll point out that tie to some of the trends that I mentioned. Doing DevOps at huge scale, doing application release automation at huge scale. Yvonne, our product manager, one of our product managers at Electric Cloud, will be talking later today in the next room over on designing your pipelines for scalability and resiliency based on doing this at very, very large scale. Anders Wahlgren, I mentioned the session, microservice and containers, if you want to kind of drill down on that a little bit more. That'll be tomorrow at 1:25 next door. And ITIL and DevOps, how those come together. There's a session by Chris Fulton, one of our technical account managers. He's going to be talking about how those can work together and talking about ServiceNow integration. Electric Cloud was recently certified as an integration with ServiceNow, and he'll be talking about how that's used in customers. If you are looking at containers and microservices, want to understand how this will work in an application release automation context, again, I encourage you to go down to the exhibit hall, the expo hall, go to the Electric Cloud booth. We've got a demo there that we can kind of show you and kind of talk about some of that in a little bit more detail. Oops. And also, if you just want to try out the product, we do offer a community edition. So if someone wants to get out there and wants to just play with our technology, we've got a community edition available at electriccloud.com/downloads. So in closing, just to kind of recap some of the key takeaways here, DevOps is no longer a fringe movement. It is a competitive necessity in the enterprise. And application release automation is considered one of the highest value technologies by customers who are adopting it and by some of the analysts. Containers, microservices, they're here, they're coming. They have to coexist with traditional architectures. You want to avoid vendor lock-in because it's a pretty dynamic market at this point in time. Shift left to identify quality, performance, security issues early in the life cycle. And your culture, your process, your organization has to be optimized for speed as you move forward. That's all I had. Thank you very much.